CLO3.4. Gross pay for piecework, straight commission withdraw, variable commission, scale and salary plus commission. Okay, in the previous video we talked about getting paid on the basis of time or getting paid for overtime. Now there's other ways you can pay employees, or you as an employee can get paid. And sometimes we get paid with what's called piecework, meaning it doesn't really matter how long it takes us to do our work. We're not getting paid on the basis of time. We're getting paid on the basis of the items we produce. So, for example, below we have a guy who works at a factory and makes 846 items and gets paid 58 cents per item. When we have piecework, you just multiply the number of items that you made and then times the rate per item, and that will give you the gross pay. So in this case, 846 items times 58 cents per item would be gross pay of $490.68. Okay, but of course it gets more complicated than just simple piecework pay. Often the pay is differentiated, or sometimes we call that variable pay, or sometimes they'll even say the phrase graduated pay. All of those mean the same thing, and it basically means you're getting paid different amounts for different quantities of work. So as we can see in this example, Abby works at a factory and she makes dolls, and for the first 50 dolls she makes, she gets paid 50 cents per doll. But then above that, if she makes more than 50 dolls, she starts getting paid 62 cents per doll. That's when she makes above 50, from 51 to 150 dolls. If she makes over 150, so 151 to 200, she starts getting paid even more money, 75 cents. And then if she makes over 200 dolls, she makes $1.25 per doll. Now you may think, oh, 300 dolls, she should get paid $1.25 each. That's not the case. In fact, she's getting paid different amounts for her different batches of production. My advice is always, when you have variable pay or differential pay, always start by making a timeline, and start your timeline at 0. Then look at the cutoffs, 50, 150, 200. Make the cutoffs 50, 150, and 200. These are the different cutoffs for the different rates of pay. In the first section of production, she'll make 50 cents per doll. Then she'll start making 62 cents per doll. Then after that, she'll start making 75 cents per doll, and then $1.25. So that's the different amounts of variable pay. The next thing you should do is fill up this timeline like a thermometer. And what do I mean by that? I mean, figure out how much she did produce. In this case, it's 300. And then mark that on the timeline, like we're filling up a thermometer. She actually produced 300 dolls. And so then lastly, we need to calculate the pay in each section. And it'll be different pay amounts for each of the different levels of production. So we'll calculate the pay in each section. So let's do that. Let's look at the first section. In the first section, you subtract the endpoints and you figure out, okay, 50 minus 0. There were 50 dolls in this first section, and she gets paid 50 cents each per doll. Then in the next section, how many dolls were there? You subtract the endpoints. 150 minus 50, there were 100 dolls. So in that next section, 62 cents per doll times 100 dolls. In the third section, how many dolls were there? Subtract the endpoints. 200 minus 150, there were 50 dolls in this section. So 50 dolls times 75 cents each. And in the last section, how many dolls were there? there were 300 minus 200, subtract the endpoints. There were 100 dolls in this last section, and she gets paid $1.25 each for all of those. If you add all that together and calculate it using your calculator, you will get a final answer that her total pay, her gross pay, will be $249.50. Okay, here is another example of variable pay. I know right away by looking at it that it's a variable pay problem. By the way, that's called differential pay or graduated pay. These are all the same. I know because I see different payment amounts for different levels of production. So again, the first thing you should do in this type of problem is make a timeline and make sure you start at 0. I know when they're giving these levels of production, they don't always start at 0, but we should. And then look at the cutoffs, 1,000, 1,600, and over. So in that first level of production, you get 3 cents per apple picked. Here it's 5 cents per apple picked, and here it's 7 cents per apple picked. The second thing we should do is what I call the thermometer step, where we figure out how many apples this person did pick, and we put it on this timeline like we're filling up a thermometer. And there we go, 1925. And then the last thing we do is we calculate the pay in each section. So for the first section, you figure out how much, what's the quantity of production by subtracting the endpoints. So there were 1,000 apples in this first section, so we have 1,000 times 3 cents each. In the second section, how many apples, what was the quantity of production? It's 1,600 minus 1,000, we subtract the endpoints. 600 apples were in this second section, 0.05. And then in the last section, how many apples were here? You subtract the endpoint, 1925 minus 1,600. There were 325 apples in that section, and 325 times 7 cents each will give us the amount we were paid in that last batch of apples that we picked. So now we just plug all this into our calculator to get the gross pay, and we get that the total pay for all of this apple picking was $82.75. Okay, now we're moving on to another type of way that employees can get paid, and this is specifically for salespeople, people who sell stuff as part of their job. So salespeople, there is something called commission. And actually, I'm going to give more examples, but when we figure out the gross pay for salespeople, there are 3 things we must consider. We must consider salary, which everyone should know what salary is. Then we will also consider commission, which I'll explain in a minute. And then the third thing we will do is consider what's called draw. So I will explain each one of these things. But by the way, this formula is not on the formula sheet. It's meant to be just a logical thing that you know. So let's just, actually, I'll explain it by going through this question. First of all, she gets paid a commission of 15%. So that's a commission rate of 15%. So that's 0.15 on her sales. So that means she gets to keep in her pocket 15% of everything she sells. So in this case, she sold $56,000 worth of items, and she gets to keep 15% of that as part of her pay. Sometimes in a company, salespeople will get commission, which, by the way, is the commission rate times the total sales. And in addition to that, they'll get salary, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just get commission. Okay, now let me explain about draw. This lady, Jackie, had a $600 draw. Let me write this in orange. Draw is when the employee of a company borrows money at the beginning of the month with the understanding that that money will then be subtracted from the paycheck. And you might have an employee do that for let's say the salesperson needs to drive around to make those sales. So they'll borrow money at the beginning for their transportation fees because that helps them do their job, knowing that that money will then get subtracted out of their paycheck. So let's look at this formula again. We've got the gross pay is the salary plus the commission minus the draw. In this specific example, there is no mention of salary, and so we will do the commission. Now the commission is the commission rate times the sales, and we will minus the draw, minus the amount that Jackie borrowed that will then be taken out of her paycheck. So the commission rate in this case is 15%. Her sales were $56,000. That would give us the total commission. But before getting the gross pay, we'll have to subtract the $600 draw that she borrowed from the company. And so then we will get a final gross pay of $7,800. Okay, let's look at one more example like that. We have Matt, and he had $180,000 in sales, so I'll write that down. Sales were $180,000. Okay, and his commission rate is 9%, so I'll write 0.09, and he had a $3,500 draw. That means at the beginning of the month, for some reason, he had to borrow money from the company, but that will get taken out of his paycheck at the end. So again, the formula that you just need to know and have memorized based on your logic is that the gross pay, the total pay, is the salary plus the commission minus the draw. Now in this case, again, there's no mention of salary. So to find the commission, I'll do the commission rate times the sales. And in this case, there is a draw, so I will include that. Then I will plug these numbers in. The commission rate is 9%. Matt gets to keep 9% of his sales, which were $180,000. But before he gets his paycheck, the company will subtract the $3,500 that he borrowed from the company. So we will get a total gross pay of $12,700. Okay, here is a new example. And similar to the variable pay for piecework, we also have variable pay when we're talking about commission. And this is when the company decides to give different levels, different percentages of commission pay based on different levels of sales. So for example, for the first batch of sales, the employee might get 4% commission. Then for another batch of sales above the first batch, they'll get 6% commission. And then when they reach a target even above that, they'll get 8% commission. So we do the variable pay for commission exactly the same as we did it for piecework. The first thing we want to start out by doing is make a timeline and start that timeline at 0. Okay, so let's do that. Let's start our timeline at 0, and we see the cutoffs. The cutoffs are 35,000, 45,000, and above. So in that first batch of sales, the commission rate is 4%. In that second batch of sales, 6%, and in the last batch, 8%. So similar to what we did before for piecework, we'll do this thermometer step where we figure out exactly how much the salesperson had in sales, and we fill it out on the timeline. So 160,000 were Jane's sales, and then we calculate the commission in each different section. So in this first section, how much money is in there? We subtract the endpoints. So we have 35,000 in sales there. So we'll do 4% of 35,000 in the first batch of sales, In the second batch of sales, how much money was in there? We subtract the endpoint, 45,000 minus 35,000. That is 10,000 in sales. So we will do 10,000 in sales times 6%. And in the last batch, we figure out how much money was in this batch of sales. 160,000 minus 45,000, subtracting those endpoints. We have 115,000 in that last batch. And in that last batch, the commission rate was 8%. So now we put it all together to get the commission was 11,200 in total. Now before we answer for the final pay, we should always check and see if there was any salary or if there was any draw. And I don't see any mention of either. So the commission in this case is the total gross pay because they made no mention of salary or draw. Okay, let's do one more example. And here I know I can see just by looking, this is going to be another example of variable pay because as I look over the question, I see different commission percentages for different levels of sales. So I know it's going to be just like the ones I've done before. So the first thing I'll do is make a timeline starting at 0. Now I know here it only starts at 8,000, but please always start your timeline at 0 and then make the cutoffs, 12,000, 20,000, 40,000 and above. All right, and from 0 to 8,000 there's no commission, but then there is 1% commission, then 3% commission, then 5% commission, and then 8% commission. Okay, the second step is the thermometer step where I see, well, how much did Bob sell? Let me fill it out on my timeline like it's a thermometer. I stop here, 40,000. Okay, and then the third step, I'm going to calculate the pay in each section. Now, before we do that, I want you to notice in the first section, there is no commission, so there's no pay there. And also notice Bob did not sell enough to get to the 8% range either, so there's no commission there. We just have commission in 3 sections. So how much money is here? Is you subtract the endpoints, 12,000 minus 8,000, there was 4,000 in that section, and Bob received 1% commission. In the next section, you subtract the endpoints, so we have 20,000 minus 12,000, which is 8,000 in that section. So 8,000 in that section and receiving commission of 3%. And then in the last section, how much money is in there? You subtract the endpoints, 40,000 minus 20,000. There is 20,000 in that section. And so we add 20,000 and a commission of 5% of that. And we will get a total commission of 1,280. Now we're not finished. You always want to check to see was there salary or was there draw. And in this case, there was salary. So we're going to add the salary, which was 1,000. I don't see any mention of draw. So in the end, we're going to get the total pay is 2,280. Okay, here is the last type of example I will do, and it looks just like a normal salary plus commission problem, but I want you to read more carefully and you'll see what the issue is. So first of all, let's label what we're reading. Joe gets paid a salary. Okay, easy enough. We've got a salary. The salary is 3,000, and he gets 4% commission. So the commission rate is 4%, but wait, here's where I see the issue. It's not on everything. It's only on sales over 20,000. So in fact, let me erase this. This is a more interesting case because you don't get 4% on everything. You only get it on sales over 20,000. So in fact, it's a variable pay question disguised. You can't notice it right away, but it's variable pay because For the first amount of sales, Joe will not get commission. So if his sales are between 0 and 20,000, he does not get commission, but above 20,000, he gets 4%. So we do the thermometer step, and we see that Joe sold 50,000, but just please notice the first batch of sales, there's not commission on that. We only get commission in this batch. So for the amount of money between 50,000 and 20,000, which was 30,000, he is going to get, let's write that a little better. The commission will be 30,000 times 4%. So the commission in this case is $1,200. So if you want to figure out the gross pay, just remember that gross pay is a formula of three things. There's salary, there's commission, and there's draw. So we'll plug in what we have. The salary is $3,000. The commission is $1,200. I don't see any mention of draw. So in this case, the total gross pay is $4,200. Okay, we'll do one last example. So we have Robin makes $7.96 per week, so that seems like a salary. Now, just be careful here. It says $7.96 per week. If everything else is given per week, then that's no issue. We're just calculating per week. If some things are given per month, then it's a little trickier question. But here I just see $7.96 per week, and then everything else is also talking about weeks, so we'll just keep it everything per week. 2% of sales over 6,500. So again, this is variable pay because you're not getting 2% on everything. You're just getting 2% on the sales that are above 6,500. So here's where Robin will get 2%, but between 0 and 6,500, Robin does not get any commission. So we will calculate the commission based on the sales of 10,350. So we fill up this timeline. 10,350 were the sales. We don't get any commission in the first amount. How much money is in here is, let's see, it's going to be 10,350 minus 6,500 is 3,850. So the commission for that quantity of sales that was above 6,500, so 3,850 times 2% equals a commission of $77. Now we're not finished again. Remember, there's salary, there's commission, and there's draw. So in this case, the salary is $7.96 per week. The commission was $77 that week. There was no mention of draw. So we get that the final gross pay for Robin was $873. Okay, good luck.